The story of Jan and Quiana Pietrzak is truly a love story. But just 2 months after what was certainly their most joyous occasion, their lives and their lifetime of happiness together would be taken from them in a manner no husband should ever be forced to watch. Welcome back to Crime A to Z, where we detail cases and criminals from their very beginning until well after other reporting ends. Today, we'll be talking about the brutally heartbreaking case of Jan and Quiana Pietrzak. There's a lot of rainfall representing our team's tears in this one, guys. The sadness of this case was honestly too much for us to handle, so we can only imagine the pain that this sweet couple's family has actually had to endure. Our most sincere condolences go out to them. Born February 16, 1982, Quiana Faye Jenkins was the only child of Roy and Glenda Faye Jenkins. She grew up in the Ontario area of Southern California. She would ultimately go on to attend San Diego State University, where she had earned a master's degree in public health in 2005. Quiana worked as a health education assistant for the county's Black Infant Care Program, with the goal of becoming a doctor. Jan Paul Pietrzak, known as Jan to his friends, was born in Poland on March 13, 1984. His mother, Henryka Varga, said that he was named after Pope John Paul II. When Jan was 11 years old, his family immigrated to the United States, where he grew up in the Bensonhurst area of Brooklyn, New York. Deeply moved by the events of 9/11, Jan joined the Marines shortly afterward in 2003. He always wanted to serve in the military and give back to his adopted country. His mother recalled him saying, "Mom, we live in this country. We have to be patriotic. We have to give back." Jan served a tour in Iraq as a helicopter mechanic and ultimately achieved the rank of a sergeant. His friends and colleagues referred to him as Sergeant P or just P. In 2005, prior to Jan being deployed to Iraq, he and Quiana met at a party for Marines being deployed to Iraq. A mutual friend of theirs who attended San Diego State introduced them. Initially, Quiana was reluctant to date a Marine, but Pietrzak won her over. To every person that knew the young couple, they were genuinely and deeply in love. The kind of life partnership that everyone hopes they'll find in life. Jan's mother shared, they were in love. It didn't matter to them that they had different skin colors. They were young, happy, and very much in love with a bright future and many planned children ahead of them. 26-year-old Quiana and 24-year-old Jan were married on August 8, 2008. Quiana's mother shared that her daughter set that specific date so that Jan would always remember their anniversary. The couple would enjoy just 2 short months of happiness together, before tragedy would strike in the form of pure evil. On October 15, 2008, when both Quiana and Jan failed to show up for work and no one could get in contact with them, co-workers from their respective jobs became concerned and both called police to request a well check. When an officer arrived at the home, he found the front door wide open and immediately called for backup. Upon entry, officers first noticed a purse with its contents dumped onto the floor near the front door, and the house smelled like both gasoline and natural gas. As soon as they entered the living room, they encountered Quiana and Jan's bound and gagged bodies on the floor. A vibrator and red candle were found near Quiana. Jan had clearly been extensively and mercilessly beaten, and Quiana had been brutally sexually assaulted. But both had been tortured before being shot and killed. The home had been ransacked and several small fires had been attempted around the home, but none had properly lighted. Police would find at least 3 distinct sets of shoe print patterns throughout the home from where the murderers had walked through the gasoline they used to try to set the fires, leaving their shoe impressions behind. One of the impressions was of a Nike Air Force One sneaker, and the other a Nike Cortez. There were also several racial slurs spray painted throughout the home's walls and mirrors. Police began questioning friends, family, and coworkers to see if anyone knew of anyone who may have issues with the couple. They found that Jan was what they call a hard charger, someone who is strict with the people who report to him, and he would call them out if they didn't do things properly. He also recently received a large bonus of $30,000, which was widely known. Police considered both of these things when evaluating potential suspects. Police initially suspected the murders may have been a racially motivated hate crime, given the slurs left at the crime scene, There was also surveillance footage at the ATM, where the killers had used Quiana's ATM card after the murders. So they had a grainy image of the suspect and knew he was wearing a blue bandana and gloves with distinct writing on them. The Naval Criminal Investigative Services, or NCIS, was called in to help local Riverside investigators, given their extensive knowledge and expertise. Upon inspection of the crime scene, NCIS immediately noticed that while numerous items of value appeared to have been stolen, oddly, Jan's military duffel bag, also known as his sea bag, remained behind. NCIS detectives quickly surmised that the only people who wouldn't want to steal such a sought-after military bag would be military personnel themselves, since they'd already have their own. Local Riverside authorities agreed. They had also suspected Marine personnel, since Quiana's ATM card had been used shortly after the murders, just half a mile from the rear gate of the Camp Pendleton Marine Corps base. As detectives continued to question friends and co-workers, one person's name continued to come up: 20-year-old Lance Corporal Tyrone Miller, who reported to Jan. Miller had made it clear to several people that he was not fond of Jan. Coincidentally, a few days after the murders, Miller's name would also come up because Miller was supposedly shot at a movie theater the day before the funeral, during what was reported as a drive-by shooting. But such an injury incurred so close to the murders was not lost on police, and it raised their suspicions about Miller even higher than they already were. They called him in for questioning. Miller's interrogation broke the case wide open. Miller initially claimed that he had no involvement in the murders. He disclosed that he and Jan had fought about minor work-related issues, but that he didn't have any animosity toward Jan. He said he was at home the night of the murders. But once detectives reminded him they could pull his cell phone records, he recalled that he may have driven through the couple's neighborhood with friends around that time. Police asked him what he would typically wear to such hangouts. To their surprise, he volunteered that when they'd hang out, they'd wear blue bandanas, and that he had several types of shoes he'd wear, including Air Force Ones. This gave police enough probable cause to search Miller's home. Within hours, police arrived at Miller's home with their search warrant, but Miller and his wife would not open the door, so they rammed the door open. Upon entry, they found Miller's wife in one direction, and on the other side of the home was Miller, who held his toddler daughter up and out in front of himself as a shield. Police yelled at Miller to put his child down. They noted that in their entire careers, they had never, ever seen a Marine or even a civilian pick up their own child and use them as a shield. Miller eventually lowered the child, and the family was seated during the search. Almost as soon as they started the search of Miller's home, police found, laying right on the table, Quiana's ATM card. They go on to find the couple's stolen jewelry, 4 spent shell casings, and then, hanging in Miller's closet, Jan's dress blue uniform, the uniform that Marines are most proud of. They also found several handguns, including the actual murder weapon, and also a bag of blue bandanas, the gloves seen in the ATM surveillance video, and extensive DNA evidence. Police were also surprised to find a lot of other clearly stolen items and IDs unrelated to the Pietrzak case, indicating that Miller may have participated in other burglaries or crimes. Miller was taken into custody and interrogated again. Despite the mountain of evidence found in his home, Miller continued to claim that he had no involvement in the murders. After about an hour of interrogation, he finally begins to break, but he minimizes his role in the crimes and says he went there with the intent to perform robbery. Miller would ultimately also name 2 others involved in the crime with him: 18-year-old Lance Corporal Emery's John, who also worked under Jan, and 20-year-old Private Kevin Cox, who worked in the same squadron. And by the time the interrogations were complete, they would learn of one more participant in the murders, someone Miller referred to as Psycho. Psycho was 21-year-old Lance Corporal Keyshawn Sykes. All were brought in for questioning, and while all 4 suspects would admit involvement that night, they all pointed the finger at each other when it came to identifying who committed the shooting, the rape, and whose idea it was. But between their statements and the statements gathered from friends they had confessed to after the murder, as well as evidence found at each of their homes, police were able to piece together the evening's brutal events. During the early morning hours of October 15th, the 4 perpetrators approached the Pietrzak's home, covering their faces in blue bandanas and wearing gloves. The plan was to secretly gain entry by breaking into the home. When they were unsuccessful, they decided Jan may be willing to open the door for someone he knew, like Cox. So they had Cox knock on the door. Jan opened the door holding a large knife. Words were exchanged between Miller and Jan. Then all 4 men rushed Jan at gunpoint. After a brief struggle, they bound and gagged Jan, and then Quiana. They then ransacked the home looking for the types of items and money they expected to find in the home. When they didn't, they tortured the couple until they got Quiana's PIN number for her ATM card. They then forced Jan to watch as Sykes and Miller brutally and repeatedly raped and tortured his new wife in front of him for hours. Once the ordeal was over, Emery's Jan, when ordered by Miller to kill them, executed the couple. They then sprawled racial slurs on the bedroom and bathroom walls and mirrors in an attempt to misdirect suspicion. They also attempted to set the home on fire to destroy any evidence, but were unsuccessful. The motives for the murder? To get money and to get revenge. The foursome expected there would be money and valuables in the house to steal, and they also wanted to exact revenge for Jan allegedly attempting to kill a promotion that Miller was up for. However, there was no evidence to support that claim. Miller was the mastermind behind the entire plan. Police would also learn that the four Marines led a secret life of crime, committing home invasions and burglaries on a regular basis. The gunshot wound that Miller received that raised the final flag for police was received accidentally from one of the group while attempting one of those such robberies. And with those claims of burglary as the motive, the official position of law enforcement would be that the crime was not racially motivated, as originally assumed. Despite that claim, public sentiment, including the belief of the victim's family and friends as well as a top investigator who surveyed the murder scene, was the opposite. They felt the crime was indeed racially motivated because of the couple's interracial relationship. Shortly before the murder, police discovered that Emery's Jan had posted a statement on his MySpace page stating, "Chillin' waiting for to killin'." This post was used as evidence that their crime was premeditated. Special agent on the case, Matt Timmons, also noted, "Everything about this crime was premeditated. You can't expect to rob somebody you know and then not be turned in." Jan and Quiana were laid to rest on October 24th. The families decided that since the couple was committed to spend the rest of their lives together, they would bury them together so they could spend the rest of their eternity together. A full military funeral ceremony was held for the couple, including a full 21-gun salute, and they were both buried together in the Riverside National Cemetery. Pietrzak's mother said she had prepared herself for the possibility that my son could die in Iraq, but to die like this, in their own home? In March 2013, 5 years after the murders, 3 of the defendants, Miller, Johns, and Cox, went on trial. All 4 defendants had already long before that been dishonorably discharged from the Marines, and all 4 defendants were facing the death penalty. Regarding the trial, prosecutor Daniel De Leon thought it critical to remind the jury that these killers were not just ordinary citizens, but skillfully trained military personnel, stating, "I think that was important to remind the jury was that these are United States Marines. Each of these men have been trained on how to operate firearms to act covertly. They use all of that training to help them commit murder." For trial testimony, it was learned that Miller and Cox told Emery's Jan, "Good job, E. You earned your stripes tonight." Cox told Jan that he grew up that night, and Jan responded, "Yeah, I did, man. Yeah, I did." The first trial of the 3 defendants would last 4 months, and the jury would deliberate less than 3 days. The second trial of Keyshawn Sykes would be held 1 year later due to limited court space. The verdicts. All 4 men were convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with special allegations related to the murders, like it taking place during the commission of a robbery. Jan was convicted as the shooter. Miller was additionally convicted of sexual assault. Sykes was additionally convicted of sexual assault as well as sexual penetration with a foreign object. Miller, Jan, and Sykes would be sentenced to death. Cox, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Cox is currently serving his life sentence without the possibility of parole at Chuckawalla Valley State Prison. Chuckawalla is a medium security prison that, at the time Cox was sent there, was running at double the capacity, holding over 3,200 prisoners, when it was designed to hold only just over 1,700. It continues to operate at 125% capacity as of 2022. Miller, Jan, and Sykes are currently on death row in California's San Quentin State Prison, which houses the state's only death row for male inmates in this state, and is the largest death row in the United States. All executions in the state of California, male and female, take place at San Quentin, with any women to be executed transported there by bus. Built in 1852, which makes it California's oldest prison, it does contain a gas chamber, but since 1996, all executions have been carried out by lethal injection. Death row at San Quentin is divided into 3 sections. North segregation, which is for prisoners who don't cause trouble. East block, a crumbly, leaky maze of a place built in 1927. And the adjustment center, which houses the worst of the worst. Most of the death row inmates reside in that second, middle-of-the-road East block section. And in that worst of the worst section, the state was forced to build solid doors on the cells to prevent what's known as gunning down or attacks from inmates throwing bodily waste through the cell bars. In 2019, Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, ordered a moratorium on the death penalty in the state. So as long as that moratorium remains in place, the 3 convicted murderers of the Pietrzaks, along with all others on death row, will remain in prison. Oddly, we have not been able to uncover even a single report of any of the 4 prisoners' prison life. So in this case, we can only hope that their day-to-day lives are filled with even a fraction of the misery they cause the victims and their grieving families. There's been a lot of outrage posted online about the killers in this case. A cleaned-up version of general sentiment is essentially people expressing sheer disgust that Marines would carry out such acts against a fellow Marine and his wife. Most concur that because of that, the 4 killers are not, and never have been, Marines, so they're not even eligible to be called ex-Marines. 3 of the killers received the death penalty, but to many, even that highest form of punishment was not sufficient to pay for the heinousness of their crimes. What are your thoughts? Were you as affected as us by the thought of 4 men who were trained to kill, turning those skills on one of their own and his innocent wife? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want to see more videos like this one, please be sure to hit like and definitely hit subscribe so you never miss a single video.